Hello, everyone. It's good to be here with you. I'm Sarah Poet. I'm in my new place back in Asheville. So excited. Feeling some new creativity coming in and just had a glorious morning. I started out in the woods with my dog. Then I went to the gym and the sauna. So I have some all natural, enthusiasm coming through today. And um, part of the conversation that I was having in the woods with a friend was about this topic of like new masculinity on the planet. And generally speaking, right now, I'm not doing too much analyzing of masculinity. That's kind of new for me, for those of you who have known me for a while. And generally speaking, I really want men telling me about masculinity. I want like masculine identified beings talking about masculinity and sharing with me, because I think that when we share our experiences is really where the juice is. It's really where the understanding is going to come through, where we are going to be able to like build bridges, and natural compassion comes online, natural curiosity comes online. And more, this is the kind of conversation that I want to have. These are the kinds of relationships that I want to have. It just feels like where we need to be and where we need to be going on the planet right now. Like if I am a primarily feminine identified being, although I know that I have both feminine and masculine inside of me. And as a woman, that path is very complex. I've talked about it many other places. I'll talk about it many more places in the future. But this, journey for a woman is like, well, what is my relationship to the masculine internally? What is my relationship to the masculine in other people, in masculine essence to beings? And then what is my relationship to the masculine essence of God, Mother, Father, God, the Godhead? What is my relationship to that essence of the masculine? We could call it Holy Father. That's my journey to explore, to dive deep with. I would say it's my responsibility, right? And then when I interact with others, I can talk about that journey and what I've kind of grokked from my experience and maybe my spiritual path and my, experiences, all the things that I've studied, et cetera, et cetera. And I can pose questions, bring forward information if people want to listen to it, if I'm asked for my opinion about what I think. And, I try to operate in that integrity. I wasn't always good at this, to say the least, understatement maybe. If we are going to have more peace on the planet, and if we're all moving toward unity, then like I definitely want to respect the journeys of others, like that unification journey, which I just named. I think it has a lot to do with feminine, masculine, but I'll elaborate on that in other places as well. That unification journey is really up to each of us. And I'm going to name it as like the responsibility of each of us, right? And so on that path, there's also like letting other people have their path, and really just sovereignty. Like I'm all about sovereignty. I want us to, all on the, like, as a spiritual being, I want us to like stay the course, do the work. Of course, like our awakening is the planetary awakening. Let's do it. Let's do it together. Let's do it alongside one another. Right. And, we can offer to one another, but like where it gets a little explainy, or like where we cross boundaries with our, like imagined authority into another person's sphere, this is problematic. Okay. So this right here is a conversation, and I'm treading lightly here in this extended intro because I want to talk about something that I have dubbed spiritual mansplaining. And it makes me chuckle a little bit. And so I really am offering this for us to consider. Um, if you are a woman or a feminine essence being and you experience this, I want to bring awareness to this. And I'll do that through 3 little case studies that I've recently experienced and kind of how it made me feel. And then, or how I felt as a result of it, I'll own that. And then just some contemplation that I've been in around this. And then I want to conclude on a positive note and I did a top 10, like 10 things that I notice about men who are not doing this. Okay. Who are not spiritually mansplaining. And whew, this is all in the spirit of, elevating our consciousness. I hope that that's what the offerings that I put forward do for us is to give us some fodder for thought, right? Fodder for consideration. And again, acknowledging our sovereignty. And I have worked long and hard to be a sovereign being. I am not saying I always get it right. I am not saying that I don't slip into victim. I'm not even saying that I don't slip into victimizer. Like, I don't even know. If I do, you can let me know, right? Like, let's give each other gentle feedback, ask if we can give the feedback, and let's give each other the benefit of the doubt, right? So I want to bring this forward, and I don't want to be like in a lower, I guess, mindset, or like, I'm not poking fun at men, right? Because that would be gross. But I am kind of laughing at this like spiritual mansplaining topic. Because it does make me laugh, and it doesn't feel good, but it like makes me chuckle because I'm like, whoa, like spiritual misogyny, like yuck. Let's not do this. Okay. So, and I'm also not saying that it's only men who would like insert a spiritual explanation for things without asking someone. But anyway, that's a long intro to say, all right, I'm going to give like 3 quick examples of how this recently came to my awareness. And the first was that, in a relationship with someone that had, opened up to enough like spiritual topics, soul topics, personal realizations, etc., opened up to enough of those kinds of, exchanges that one day I shared a story of personal realization, and I would say like an account of something that I was traversing on my soul's journey. Now, when I do this, and if you listen to my podcast or you know me, you know that it's always a both and for me. Like, I am, we're always on the path. We're always on the sacred remembering path. Remembering, waking up to the truth of who we are. There's always going to be something to uncover on that path. And it's exciting. And sometimes that involves, going through a healing layer, or healing a layer of trauma or woundedness. And then other times that is like aligning to the truth of who you are and soaring, right? And so that sacred remembering path is like the both and of, I'm an awesome human who's here on the planet to realize who I am and participate in global ascension. And I've got shit to work out. And I think that this is really healthy, because when we don't think that we have shit to work out, then we get into all sorts of energy snatching and, who's got the authority and who does. Like, that's the old game that we're leaving, right? So it needs to be, in my opinion, like, okay and acceptable for all of us to kind of be in that both and that is sovereignty. That is seeing one another as sovereign humans, sovereign beings, to say, this is where I am on my journey right now. And the response that I got was like this explanation of my karma and how I'm going to be so much better off once I figure this out. It was like putting me in my place. And this was I think it was in an email, and I was like, ooh, like that was the feeling, like, yuck, like what just happened? What, questions such as, why did he assume that he had the authority to say that to me? And like, ooh, he just positioned himself, in his mind, like above me by explaining that to me. Like he was more spiritually aware and more, I don't know, closer to God or whatever than I was. And I was like, ooh, like just no, thank you. And of course, my feminine doesn't want to open to that again. And, I'll say that this is something that for many years, as I was living that both and path of integration, I'm still doing it, y'all, still actively integrating feminine, masculine, still on the reunification path, not to totally crystalline yet, haven't ascended yet, right? Like still in a body, still on this earth. And that is what I will be doing until, the day that I'm not breathing in this body anymore. And then I'll probably come back and do it again. It's like the work doesn't stop, and it's beautiful. both and. But, in our culture that makes you feel like you have to have it together and makes you feel like you have to be further on your path than you are or something, and we live in this, we have lived in a dominator paradigm, right? Where someone had power and someone doesn't. So sometimes when people, are comfortable with their own vulnerability, someone who's not comfortable with vulnerability will have to explain something in order to, position themselves as an authority. And I would say that that's a complex inside of the human. Like we have to decide, are we going to participate in that kind of, authority seeking, I'll call it, in a dominator paradigm? Or, are we moving toward a partnership paradigm in ourselves where we ask more questions, where we stay curious, where we want to uplift one another? I'll talk about that in my top 10. Okay. So the second example moving forward was, I was actually thinking about the first example, and okay, Facebook is a whole thing in my world. Like I got off Facebook in 2022, took a break, started fresh. And I really there is something that happens on Facebook that does not happen on other channels, as far as I see it, where like people on Facebook need to constantly correct one another. And it is like all of this, I know more spiritually than you do vibe. And it's so yuck that, I was saying something that I forgot to kind of conclude, because I find myself doing this, on Facebook, and it's like in that paradigm where we recognize that it is both and that we don't have it all together yet. There's this thing that I internalized as a woman that was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say anything about this because I'll be seen as like too wounded or too, if I make a mistake in the way that I say this, I won't be taken seriously. Do you know what I mean by that? I mean, and it does happen. Like the judgment, I think, is it's very real. And I've really experienced it as like a female entrepreneur, although I was also internalizing, and this is like a really big kind of topic. It's like, showing up as you are, but then when we look to people to be authorities, then we feel like we have to be an authority. And then we get into this like icky perfectionism thing, and like we don't really let ourselves be human. And I said, fuck that, in 2022, and just kind of like retracted out of the public as much, and just like decided how I wanted to be around that. And other things were going on as well. And so what happened on Facebook then, like just last month or so, was that one day I was like, okay, I'm going to allow myself to post something that's imperfect, that kind of pokes a little fun at this thing that I think is hilarious. And I'm going to allow myself, how to say this? It was like to not be so evolved. I think the pressure that I have so often felt in talking about these things like masculine, feminine, and gender is like, boy, oh boy, you better get it right, or you're going to be attacked or called less conscious, or look at that woman who hasn't worked out her shit with men yet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like there are so many ways to write off someone because of something that they say that's maybe like, human. Okay. And so I was like, I'm going to make a post like this. And I had literally been watching other people not take themselves so seriously on Facebook. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to not take myself so seriously on Facebook. And in one of those like little colored boxes on Facebook, I wrote the words spiritual mansplaining with like the eye roll emoji. Okay. And I went on a hike with my son, and literally, I hope y'all can find the humor in this. And I'm gonna talk it out, okay, before you judge me as less conscious. Okay, I'm gonna talk it out. It was hilarious to me. Like I genuinely got back from the hike in good spirits from the hike, looked at the Facebook, and the first comment was a man spiritually explaining to me how I attract men who spiritually explain. And I was like, oh my God, the irony. Like at first I was like, is this a joke? Like, does he realize what he's done? Or is this like, this is actually happening? So I said, spiritual mansplaining with an eye roll. And the first comment was a man who I do not know, like personally. He said that we had met once in person years ago. Good Lord, I've done so many things in my brain since then. I so apologize for not remembering meeting you. And, so like someone who does not know me genuinely, who is trying to explain to me in a Facebook comment how I attract men who are spiritually explaining things to me. And I was like, brother, the irony is like, this is genuinely hilarious to me. And so in short, there was some upset. And then I realized that I had actually genuinely hurt his feelings, both by not remembering meeting him and by laughing. And so for that, I do apologize. And I attempted to reach out and apologize, but he had blocked me from any contact, because apparently I'm very, he saw me as presumably very mean or very like unevolved as a woman. And if he ever gets a hold of this podcast, brother, I did try to look you up and like email you and ask you for coffee because I think there's a big misunderstanding. And I wanted to like try to make it right. But then it was like, okay, you blocked me, water under the bridge, right? So then I like let it go and was like, okay, back to trying to be evolved and, not making jokes and don't get it wrong. And like all these things, right? Like this externalized, internalized judgment, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So then it's like a month later, I've like dropped the spiritual mansplaining topic and going about my business on my soul path and listening to the voice of guidance and, doing my path, my sacred remembering path as I do. And I reached out to someone that I had a prior relationship with, and I shared something that was a realization. Now, without going into this too much, why did I do that? Well, I felt like it. And I think it was like a part of my resolution. Like I had gone through this layer of healing this thing, and it took a long time, and it had to do with this person. And I also was like, he's a really aware human. I want to share this realization with him. And I will share that what happened in me after I followed that intuition was that I felt like I handed something back that I had been holding, like to realize what had been out of energetic integrity and then be the only one holding it. It's again like this, another layer of women and the feminine energetically laboring something that like wasn't all mine to labor. And so I wasn't laboring it anymore. I had realized it. And it was like this intuition was like, you figured all this out. You can share with him that like, this is what you realize was going on back there and how energetically it's not in integrity for two conscious humans. And so I shared that. And the response that I got was like a little confusion and like this assumption that I was like coming from a wounded place. So again, what is this assumption? Like that women who are owning their journey are coming from a wounded place? But like, okay, we need to evolve that. Like, I'm just going to name right here. We just need to evolve that in the planetary consciousness. Hopefully this conversation is helping. And so it's like, oh, okay. He's assuming that I'm wounded and that I'm attacking him. Let me try again. And so I tried again. And there was this like vibe of this explanation that came back to him. And he used a word twice. He used the word simply. Sarah, this is simply how it is. And then there was like an explanation, this like simply. And after it happened the second time, I didn't like really have a need to like keep going. I just, I was like, I got the intuition to share it. I shared it. And then I was like, ooh, that word simply is kind of like rubbing me wrong, but I don't need to say anything else. And then like it was used twice. And I was like, no, just because this is the explanation that you are providing does not mean that it is accurate. And it was a spiritual explanation. Like, Sarah, this is simply what happened. And I'm not going to like go into it or try to paraphrase or quote because, I do want to be in energetic integrity about that. But it was this like, this relationship explanation, like this spiritual relationship explanation. And I sat with it for a while and I was like, no, like, again, ooh, like you feel like you've been like slimed or something when this happens. It's like, like this negation of, wisdom, or like, who I am. Like clearly all three of these individuals do not know me, like do not know the authentic me. And it's, this is where we get into like some yummy exploration of like human energetic boundaries and how much power we give to things like this, so it's like, before in my life, I gave a ton of energy to this kind of thing because it was like the thing I felt I had to fight my way out of. Like my father was, abusive via religion. Like, so there was a lot of spiritual explaining and justification for behavior. So am I potentially a little like sensitive to this? Of course, right? It's like, we live it, we pay attention, and then it's our medicine to bring back. So there's a question that is a sovereignty question of like, how much energy and reactivity do you want to give? So when someone does any kind of effort, like, or action or energetic action to dominate, like, and in this case, I'm talking about the spiritual mansplaining, is like a domination effort. There's all kinds of layers here. Like there's a need on their end to do it. Like there's a need on one's, like in one's psychology, to do this, to prove to oneself some level of mastery and like justification of self, and et cetera, et cetera. But then I would be like trying to figure out what's going on in someone else's brain, and like I do that generally, but I'm not really into doing that like in these cases. And it snatches my energy for me to loop into it. So if someone has made any kind of like grab on your energy, attempt at domination, attempt at explanation, attempt at, a little bit of gaslighting, like that second example is like spiritual gaslighting. Like, how did you bring this on yourself, woman? Like 2 words, spiritual mansplaining. And then he's like, well, you must have caused this. So we can be aware, like with our spidey senses. And as we become more sovereign and more in our own energetic integrity, these attempts will just kind of like ping off of like your energy body, because it's like ooh, no, like that is not what we're doing here. That is not welcome here. And I would say in the past, it would have like hooked into me differently. I would have felt like I needed to justify who I was, or that they weren't correct, or, and then I would give my energy to it, which is entrapment. Okay, could say a lot more about that, but we'll move on. It's hard for me to move on from that because it's so juicy. So we don't want to give our energy to the attempts at domination, because giving our energy to attempts at domination, yes, hooks us in, takes our feminine energy, and can also impact our womb and creational energy. Okay, so we want to like be aware of where it feels like that, ew, ick, ooh, I feel like I've just been slimed. Like, no, not truth in my system. Like, ooh, something is off here, and then like keep it outside your energy field. Don't bring it in to analyze and feel it through and say, oh my gosh, maybe I did cause this. All of those are old tactics at looping in the feminine and siphoning energy. Okay, so that somebody else can feel more powerful and so that they can use your energy. Okay, that's like why domination and power paradigms exist. Okay. So that's a fun topic to revisit another day, right? Okay, I'm going to be saying plenty more on women's resources and sovereignty. That's like where the bulk of my work is going. So, all right. Internalized misogyny is tough, and I want to say that we're all trying. I think we're all trying. I think we're all trying. I know all three of these men are, somewhat conscious, like a good degree of consciousness. So, like, we're not all perfect. I'm probably not perfect in even giving this topic today. I don't freaking know. But also, like, let's be like gentle with each other. Let's just be a little bit more gentle with each other, right? And seek to understand. Like, I'm always saying that to my kiddo these days, and to others. It's like, okay, let's just seek to understand where the other person's coming from, what's going on here, before we like jump into, assumptions and in unintentional energy snatching, which we don't want to do. So I know that, like, undoing the power paradigm from all of us, from victim victimizer, is very, it's difficult work. And it is where we need to be gentle with one another. And it is where we need to be conscious. And that is why I'm okay naming these things, because it really is all about consciousness. So what I notice about men who are not spiritually mansplaining, I was on a roll with this list, and so I made 10. Okay, so here's my 10 for this moment, maybe a top 10 for this moment, of what I notice about men who are not doing this, who are not spiritually mansplaining. Okay, so we're having much better conversations, these guys and I. Okay, 1, they're listeners. They are like listeners in that seeking to understand. There's a curiosity and maybe even asking more questions, right? Because good listeners ask more questions so that they can seek to understand. Thank you, listeners. 2, these men thank me for sharing my stories and my experience as medicine. So there's a recognition that hearing the story is not about wounding. It's about an element of the great mystery, an element of the unfolding. Like, these men recognize that what a woman who is aware is noticing is medicine for their evolution. Huge. And that's not me saying, like, they're listening and I'm right and they're taking it all in. It's like there's a recognition, and I think I distinctively write this one as one of the most important ones later, but there's a distinct recognition that to seek to understand the conscious feminine is an active part of their consciousness evolution. They're aware that the feminine's been unheard. And so there's a seeking to understand, and there's a generosity in the listening. Okay. 3, these men, if we're in conversation and I'm sharing something openly or vulnerably because I'm trusting them as someone that I've chosen to have a relationship with, and these are the only people that I'm choosing to have relationships with at this point, is they ask, I noticed something. Do you mind if I reflect to you? And the answer is always yes. It's always yes, because I've chosen to be in a shared like exchange with this person. And so if I'm like opening up, having a conversation, having a relationship, then I'm going to operate at my level of sovereignty, integrity, vulnerability, consciousness all the time. Like that's who I'm going to be in that exchange. And so therefore, if I'm trusting that relationship, and this was something I was trying to get across in that Facebook conversation that was like, tiny boxes on Facebook is just impossible for actual consciousness most of the time. But it's like, I'm always willing to hear the feedback of a man if it is a higher level, of consciousness in the relationship. Like if it's mansplaining, I can say like, no, you don't get it, right? And there's this other quality to conscious communication that men who are not spiritually mansplaining are using. And it sounds like, I think I see something about that, about what you're describing. Do you mind if I share a reflection? Do you mind if I share like feedback or what I'm seeing? And that is so beautiful because there's masculine wisdom in that. Like, I don't hang around with just anyone. Like, of course, I want to hear the, feedback or the wisdom or the sight or the intuition or the logic of these men that are asking this question. Like, if you're asking that question, the answer is yes, I want to hear your observation. Okay. So a give and take there in that level of exchange, right? Okay, number 4, these men, they invite, they like highlight what they're seeing, they uplift, and they introduce. So what I mean by this is there's a recognition of the wisdom of the feminine, and then they're like introducing the woman into their circles and uplifting her work in her medicine, because of all of the above. Number 5, these men are saying thank you. Okay, like thank you for sharing, thank you for your time, thank you for your resources, thank you for your wisdom, thank you for being my friend. Like there's a thank you. Thank you for your collaboration. Thank you for your reflection. Okay. Thank you, feminine, for your resources instead of trying to gobble them up and dominate them. Okay. So now we are in new territory. Like the conversation that I was having in the woods this morning, what does the new masculine look like? And I was like, it's not up to me to describe the masculine. Now here I am doing a podcast about it. So these are some things that I am noticing about the new masculine on the planet. Number 6, they share their experience. Gosh, what was I thinking when I wrote that? I think what I mean by that is like they're sharing. Oh yeah, okay. They're sharing without saying this is authority. It's like the same thing I'm doing. Like I'm sharing my experience and what I've kind of figured out. They're doing the same thing. There's like a sacred neutrality. There's a sacred respect. Okay. So they're sharing not like, I've got the authority, I've got the, answers, the domination that I'm going to impart on you. They're like, well, here's what I'm noticing. Here's what I'm figuring out for myself. Right? It's just this like neutrality of shared experience that's so beautiful and so respectable and so yummy. Like the paradigm of needing to know everything so that you can prove who you are is the paradigm that's falling away. So love when that is recognized by men. Number 7. Oh, I skipped ahead. Number 7 says, they don't need to be an authority. This is a whole other topic, like natural authority and like leadership and like the essence of leadership in feminine and masculine. But like in this moment, I'm thinking about like the embodied like leadership of a man that man, oh my gosh, it's like light filled. My body, if you're watching the video right now, is like doing all kinds of movements because it just feels so yummy. Like the masculine who is like embodied in a natural leadership. It's not in the mind. It's like he's brought this like Christic nature into his essence, into his being, into his body, and his embodiment on the planet. And the way that my body is like kind of moving and responding to even just thinking about that, like if that kind of masculine is in my presence, I am naturally going to like open to what it has to say, right? Because if that essence is bringing forward information, like there is a level of authority in that, but that man never has to tell me his authority or establish his authority with me. Do you see the difference in that? So old paradigm, I don't even want to talk about it because it's so yucky, but like dominator paradigm would say, I am the authority, you have to listen to me. And the new authority is the embodied Christic nature, men. So you got to go figure that out. And then we cannot help but to listen to you. We cannot help but to open to you and to your wisdom. Like, please, men, go do that. Go go embody your Christ nature, your Christed Christic nature, your light body, your all of it. Embody it, bring it to the planet. Don't just be like spiritual wordy like wordsmith. That's how we know the difference. It's like blah, the spiritual mansplaining is not embodied. The spiritual mansplaining is not friggin' embodied. Like you don't embody the wisdom to be telling me, a woman this far on my embodied spiritual feminine awakening path, reunification path, like you don't have any authority on my embodied wisdom until you are also embodying your wisdom. And then nobody's playing a domination game and we're just meeting each other. So I think that's enough said about that. So yummy. Can't wait to see more of that on the planet. Feel more of that on the planet. Listen to more of that on the planet. Can't wait. Number 8, they share the stage. The other day I was invited to collaborate literally on a speaking proposal. And the man who invited me said, I'm just not going to be the only person on the stage anymore. Like I'm going to always have a co-presenter. I'm going to always collaborate, especially if I'm talking about like gender dynamics as a man, I want a woman there. And that I really respected. So sharing the stage, both literally and metaphorically in life. Number 9, I touched on this already, realizing the wisdom of the feminine. I experience this as like, there are men in my life who distinctly recognize the depth of my wisdom because of the path that I've walked. And I don't need to establish that with them. They just recognize it. And then there are other men like these 3 that I mentioned that recognize that there's something, but they still want to dominate it. They still want to have the authority over it. And oh man, I just summarized that really well. And that's what I used to try to fight against and prove. And like, that just doesn't happen anymore, again, because I'm not giving it my energy, because there's nothing I could say or do, with or for that man until he's like ready for it. And when a man is really on this, you could call it a king path or a Christed path or this embodied ascension path, this leadership path, planetary leadership, planetary consciousness. Like when a man is on that journey, he is seeking out for himself feminine oracular embodiments, teachings. And he's recognizing it, because just as I was speaking about the embodied recognition of a man who's in that consciousness, there's an embodied recognition of a feminine who's in that consciousness. And so these men who are going beyond dominator and into this embodied consciousness, of leadership, of embodied awakening, of like true union and true respect for union, they are naturally going to seek out their evolved relationship with the feminine. And I can pretty much promise you that any man who is going to attempt to have a power dynamic with a woman, grab her energy, explain something to her spiritually or otherwise, or like be in a relationship non-committally, that man has not approached his like true return to God relationship with the Holy Mother, with the divine feminine essence on, on and off planet, seen and unseen. And he's going to be trying to get it from a woman. So he has a relationship with women and the feminine. Well, really, he has a relationship with the feminine where he doesn't feel like seen, secure, or held by the great mother. Like he hasn't been obliterated in his heart by her. And so he's still looking for that relationship with the feminine through women. I could talk about this a lot more. We could call this a mother wound. It's like the greatest mother wound of all time, men being separated from the feminine. And so I know in my heart of hearts that like as men wake up to this and want to experience the feminine without having to dominate the feminine, that they can find me. And we can spend some time together in a coaching relationship, or most of where my energy is going to go these days is like, if it's not a close friend, or like a professional colleague that I'm giving my energy to, you're going to need to come through my work container, because this essence that men are wanting to seek, if you're not trying to dominate in order to get it, then you're recognizing the value that it holds, and you are coming, forward to women and respectfully wanting those, I'll say those codes of the feminine that, an oracular embodied woman who has walked this path can hold that space. And this is really delicious for a man, by the way, because he doesn't have to go bumpity bump, like on a road with a woman in a relationship. And like he can excel by stepping into the space of, I'm going to again say like an oracular woman, a Sophianic, like the embodied wisdom teachings of the Sophia that some of us, have walked this path, and now we have. And it's like, you don't just like get to overpower that anymore, and you don't get just to like grab at that anymore, and have your day with it. It's like when this level of wisdom teachings is embodied, then these like new paradigm men are going to respect that so fully and not try to take from it, but like, give in reciprocal exchange, like value that and uplift it. Okay, so I love that. I love that there's this new paradigm masculinity. And you hear kind of intrinsically in this that this new masculine also is like, partnered with, obviously, what is happening with the feminine on the planet. So if I didn't embody this, then I would just be bitching about men. Right? Like if I didn't embody this, then I would be out of integrity in talking about it. And so the evolution of the feminine and the evolution of the masculine obviously go hand in hand in hand. And I have so much to learn from this embodied Christic masculine. And I'm so excited to learn from that. And I'm just kind of like oracularly, going off the notes at this point, because it's like, yeah, this is what's coming through and this is what's true. And so, the evolution of one is the evolution of the other. And, I'm not sitting around being like, where are all of the evolved men? It's like, oh my gosh, as we're all evolving and embodying, and I'm seeking to understand, and you're seeking to understand, and more people are waking up and really going the distance on this path, then that means that we're going to meet one another more frequently and be able to share what we have found. And that is really, really beautiful. Like I feel the beauty of that inside of me as a woman. Like, yes, I seek to understand more of the embodied wisdom of this divine masculine as well. And okay, number 10, not necessarily like the top, but top 10 for now, total top 10 for now, is I wrote a recognition of the path traveled. But in some ways, I feel like I have already recounted what I meant by that. So, yeah, so recognition of the path traveled. Let's just breathe with that. Recognizing the path that we all have traveled and are still traveling, because no one's perfect yet. And no one needs to dominate anyone else or know more than the other. Those are old games. So breathing in what seeking to understand feels like. And then on the next breath, I invite you to just like breathe in what it would feel like if someone else were seeking to understand rather than judging you or trying to be an authority over you. Just breathe in that sovereignty of like, thank you for wanting to know, for wanting to understand my embodied truth. Okay, so hopefully that's just like a little energetic sort of taste of what we can do for one another, be for one another as we move forward on this path of reunification that's clumsy because, we have a lot of indoctrinated programming, like a lot. So if this conversation was helpful, I invite you to do a few things. First of all, please make sure that you are on my email list at sarahpoet.com. I am trying out some new events that is like peacemaking between genders. And you're also always like welcome to reach out to me if there is a relationship, a conflict. It could be a couples relationship. It could be in an organization, where like something, and maybe that thing has to do with gender, probably has to do with feminine, masculine, but like maybe we're not ready to name that yet. But there's like a trauma of, stuckness, separation, domination, and you want to move through to understanding, cohesion. Like you want to evolve the system and the system of operations and the system of understanding, that is where I help and support and excel. So that's where I stopped just talking about the things on the podcast, and like we really do the work. And I can really help and facilitate that because I do very much have an eye for the systems and like what are the parts in the systems where if we just tweak this or that, we can allow for the evolution that so naturally wants to happen. And so you can reach out to me via sarahpoet.com. But if you liked this conversation, please, like it, share it, get on the email list, do the things to support more folks having access and exposure to these conversations and wisdom that I am putting out there. Thank you so much for being here. This is Sacred Remembering. I'm Sarah Poet, and love and unification blessings to you all.